be a better you. And in order to be a better you, we got to start asking tough inner questions, right? And then having those conversations and those candid, honest conversations with our children. And if they want to be a part of this. And I liked what you said, that your job is to help your kid fall in love with their sport, and then to protect them inside of that, right? Find ways, give them rest, things like that. What are coaches getting wrong about leading competitive teams as well? Like, I think there's a big part of this, that coaches as role models as much as parents, right? I think there's parents, you said, are kind of the number one. I think coaches have a pretty big influence as well in the development here.
I mean, they're probably the most influential person outside of the immediate family for a kid who plays a lot of sports, right? And so this goes back to what Shane said, like, you coach a person, not a sport, and you model that. How do you bring an athlete's personal narrative closer to reality, closer to the truth, right? So how do you get someone who thinks, well, I'm like the best player out here, and as a coach, you're like number 14. You're no way, right? And so how do you bring their narrative closer to the truth? And then I think the extension of that is, how do you bring their parents' narrative closer to the truth, right? And, if you're coaching track and field, like, here's your time. You're not good, but when you're coaching basketball, when you're coaching soccer, when you're coaching hockey, it's a lot of it's subjective, right? And so how do you bring that person who thinks they should be on the first line and they're on the third line closer to the truth of, like, well, here's some objective things that you're not doing that they do, to get there. And then when their parents are, well, I think Johnny should be on the first line. Well, this is what the first line people do, and this is what Johnny does. And so, it's not happening right now.
Right. You just brought back so many conversation, like, man, I'm having PTSD in so many ways, which is good, but and just to keep going, dwelling on that point just a little bit, like in the new book, you talk about how trying to speak to parents, getting them to understand that coaches are your allies and not your adversaries. And I've seen more in the last, especially as my kids have been coming up through youth sport. I coached youth baseball for 5 years, and just seeing, especially in youth sports, I don't see it as much at the college level, but just in youth sports, this whole idea of, like, it's almost like the parents assume many times that the coach is against them and it almost seems like they think the coach wants the worst for their kids. But it's like, in actuality, most coaches, I find, want what's best for the kid, but end up fighting against all the messaging their players are getting on the ride home or at home in the backyard and all this kind of stuff. And like, through that section of the book, what are maybe some tangible steps of just helping parents understand that coaches are allies, not adversaries?
Yeah. I mean, number one, I think from a coaching standpoint, it's having sort of boundaries around what are appropriate conversations and what are not, right? So when can you have them, and what do we talk about? And we're not going to talk about, Jenny's teammates' playing time or position or tactics. Like, that's not your role as a parent. Like, but we can talk about your kid and what's going to make her better or him better. When can we do this? Don't meet me in the parking lot after a tough loss, or when you don't think your kid played enough or something. Like, that's not appropriate. Like, you gotta let the emotions go. But then just this understanding, like, coaches are human, and like you guys, like, I don't know very many coaches of, let's call it, like, middle school and up sports, who aren't sitting there going, what gives us the best chance to be successful today? Right. And so if your kid's not playing over another kid, it's very, 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 very unlikely that it's because, your kid is just getting politically screwed over. Right. Which is where parents are, why are they benching my kid, or where my kid could be better? It's probably something that they're doing or not doing in practice. It's probably something that they're not grasping from the team concept or how we're going to play. It's probably something with their attitude and how they treat their teammates, or are they coachable? Or do they show up on time, or they do things extra? There's a lot of things that athletes can control. And so as a coach, I think you have to start with like being able to communicate those things to parents, and then and be a truth teller. Like, and
Yeah.
this is really hard, like you have to not be afraid to tell people the truth, and sometimes disagree and be like, you know what, I guess we just don't see it the same way, but I'll take another look and see, but this is what's happening with your kid. And and again, I just think parents are, they're really motivated a lot by fear these days. Fear that their kid's going to miss out, fear that they're not keeping up on the youth level where, your kids are kind of going through, especially yours, Justin, younger. Like, youth sports is such a big commitment right now, financially and time-wise, that when you take a 12-year-old kid who's been on this team for 3 years and you say, you know what, everyone else grew and you're still small, you would do so much better on the B team, right? Because you'll play more and you'll do this. Well, you're not just cutting that kid from his group, you're cutting parents from their friend group, right?
Right.
And so they're going to push back because that's the people they've hung out with for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. And in that moment, often they won't look at what's best for my kid. They'll look at, well, what's best for me? Like, I don't want to go to the tournament with those new people. I don't know them. I want to go to the tournament with all these people I've been going to. And so they'd rather their kid rot on the third line. And as a coach, like, well, 2 years, if you're not playing at all, you're probably not going to make it. And one of those kids who went to the B team and plays most of the game is going to beat your kid out. But if it's really more important that you're in the hotel bar with these people for the next 2 years, that's too bad, because your kid's the one who's getting screwed.